2090, the decision to colonize the harsh sun beat down on the barren desert, casting long shadows over the wreckage of the forgotten ship. For weeks, the group of teenagers had been surviving on nothing but what little they could scrounge up from the remnants of their broken world. After the global disaster, the world as they knew it had collapsed, leaving humanity scattered and desperate. But here, in the middle of nowhere, they had found something. A ship, half buried in the sand, its sleek metal body an anomaly in the otherwise empty wasteland. The group stood at the edge of the wreck, staring at the ship in awe. It was massive, much bigger than anything they had ever seen before. Its surface was pitted with signs of age and neglect, but it still had a strange beauty. The ship was a relic from a time long gone, a remnant of an era that had passed. But to the teens, it was more than just a ship. It was a chance to survive. "Do you think it'll work?" Max asked, looking at the others with a mixture of excitement and doubt in his voice. His eyes were fixed on the ship, but the uncertainty in his tone was clear. "I don't know," said Jenna, her voice steady but filled with determination. "But it's our best shot. This place, it feels like we've found something more than just a ship. We can turn it into a colony. We can make a life here." The group exchanged looks, each of them silently contemplating the idea. They had been on the run for so long, surviving day by day, never knowing where their next meal would come from or where they would sleep. But here, in the ship's shadow, they could see a new beginning. It wasn't much, but it was hope. "We don't have any other choice," said Liam, the oldest among them. At 17, he had taken on the role of leader, guiding the others with a steady hand. "If we want to survive, this is it. We can make this ship our home, our refuge. We just have to figure out how." The others nodded in agreement. They had all been through so much, too much, to turn back now. This ship, this abandoned vessel, was their only chance at something better. It would take hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, but they knew they could make it work. Max stepped forward, glancing back at the group. "I'll start checking the outer hull. Maybe we can find a way inside. We need to see if it's still intact." Jenna and Liam followed him, eager to get to work. They had already spent days scoping out the area, and now they had finally come across the one thing that could give them the future they had dreamed of. It was almost too good to be true. As they walked round the ship, they noticed the damage the years had done. The sandstorm that had buried it had left deep scars, and the metal had corroded in places. But the ship was still standing, still holding its ground, as though waiting for them to come and claim it. The entrance, a large hatch on the side, was covered with thick layers of rust. Max tried to pry it open, using a metal rod they had scavenged from a nearby wreckage. It took a few tries, and then, with a screeching sound, the hatch slowly gave way. Dust and debris poured out, and the smell of stale air hit them all at once. Liam looked at the others. "It's not much, but it's better than what we've got." Jenna was already inside, her flashlight cutting through the dark. "There's a lot of junk in here, but it looks like the systems are intact. We might be able to get some power running, at least enough to keep things going for a while." Max climbed in after her, his eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The interior was large, filled with storage lockers, old control panels, and equipment. It was clear that this place hadn't been used in a long time, but there was still a sense of life in it, like the ship was waiting for someone to return and wake it up. As they explored, they came across a large control room. The walls were lined with consoles, many of them covered in dust, but a few still seemed operational. Max wiped his hand across one of the panels, and it flickered to life, casting a soft glow in the room. "This is it," Max said, a grin spreading across his face. "We can do this. We can make this our home." The others joined him, standing around the console. They could see the remains of the ship's systems still intact, and though they were old, they might be able to restore them. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. Liam looked at them all. "We have the chance to build something here. A place where we can live, survive, and maybe even thrive, but we need to work together. No more running. This is our future." Jenna smiled. "We've got this. We'll make it work." They stood there for a moment, looking around at the ship, taking in the reality of what they were about to do. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about creating something lasting, something of their own. They had the chance to make this ship their new home, their refuge in a world that had forgotten them. And as they began to plan their next steps, the wind outside howled, a reminder of the desolate world beyond the ship. But inside, there was hope, a future, the chance to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. They had found their refuge, but they had no idea what secrets the ship would lies beneath the sand would reveal. The first signs of trouble. The days that followed felt like a breath of fresh air. The ship, though old and battered, became their sanctuary. The teens worked together, fixing what they could, creating a routine. They scavenged the surrounding desert for supplies, using what little technology they could access from the ship's control room to repair parts of the vessel. Slowly but surely, they began to make the ship livable, transforming it from a forgotten wreck into a thriving home. Jenna and Liam worked on reactivating the ship's communication systems, hoping to make contact with any remaining survivors. Max took charge of food and water, using his scavenging skills to find enough to keep them going. The colony was taking shape, and for the first time in a long while, they felt a glimmer of hope. They were no longer just surviving. They were building something for the future. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. At night, when the wind outside howled and the stars glistened above, the ship would creak. It wasn't the normal sound of aging metal shifting under pressure. It was something more deliberate, almost as if the ship itself were alive. Each night, as the wind picked up, the strange noises grew louder. Rattling, worry, and faint echoes from the depths of the ship reached their ears. At first, the teens brushed it off. The ship was old. It was expected. But the feeling of being watched began to settle over them like a thick fog. Max was the first to notice it. While working on the food supply one evening, he caught movement. Out of the corner of his eye, a shadow, a figure moving just beyond the reach of his flashlight. He quickly turned, but nothing was there. His heart raced as he scanned the area. The shelves and crates stood untouched, yet the feeling lingered. Something was moving in the ship. But what? The next day, he brought it up to Jenna and Liam. "I saw something last night," he said, his voice low. "A shadow. It moved across the hallway. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but... Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? Maybe it was just a loose pipe rattling or something." Max shook his head. "No, it wasn't that. It was something... different." Liam frowned, his brows furrowing in concern. "We've been hearing things at night too, right? Maybe we should check it out. We can't ignore it forever." The group agreed. That evening, they decided to investigate the ship's interior more thoroughly. As they made their way through the ship, the air grew colder, and the eerie hum of the ship's systems filled the silence. The corridors were dimly lit, the flickering lights casting long, ghostly shadows. They could hear the ship creaking, its metal frame groaning with each step they took. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the lower levels of the ship. The temperature had dropped significantly here, and the air was thick with the scent of dust and metal. The deeper they went, the more unsettling it became. The walls were covered in strange symbols and markings that looked like nothing they had ever seen. The designs were alien in nature, as if they had been etched there by hands that weren't human. "It looks old," Jenna murmured, running her fingers over the markings. "This ship's not just from our time. I don't think it's even human." Max swallowed hard. "Maybe we've been wrong about this place. Maybe it's not just a ship." They continued through the lower levels, and as they rounded a corner, they came across a sealed door, one they hadn't noticed before. It was hidden behind a large piece of machinery, half covered in rust and dust. The markings on the door matched the symbols they had seen earlier, almost like a warning. Liam tried to open the door, but it was sealed shut. "It's locked, but we need to see what's behind it." After a few attempts, they managed to break. Through the lock, the door creaking open with a long, agonizing sound. Inside, they found an empty room, its walls lined with dusty crates. But it wasn't the crates that caught their attention, it was what lay in the center of the room. In the middle of the room was a strange, glowing object. It was shaped like a sphere, covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with a faint light. The closer they got, the stronger the hum of energy became. It was as if the sphere was alive, its energy radiating into the very walls of the room. This isn't just part of the ship," Jenna whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "This is something else, something alien." Max's throat tightened. "We need to get out of here, now." But it was too late. As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The hum of the sphere grew louder, vibrating through the walls. The temperature dropped even further, and the air became thick with tension. "Something's wrong," Liam said, his voice shaking. "This wasn't part of the plan. We need to get back to the ship, now." But as they fumbled in the dark, trying to find their way back to the hatch, a voice echoed through the room. A voice unlike any they had heard before. "You have awakened me," the voice said, the words vibrating in their minds. "And now you will understand the price of your discovery." The teens froze, fear flooding their veins. The ship wasn't just a colony, it was a tomb, a prison, and they had just let something out, something that was not ready to be freed. The unveiling of the sand's secrets. The air in the ship's lower levels was thick with the scent of ancient dust. But now it felt like something else, like the very ship was alive, holding its breath. The teens stood frozen in the dark, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them. The voice that had echoed through their minds still reverberated in their ears, a whisper that sent shivers through their spines. "You have awakened me." Max was the first to break the silence. His voice trembled, barely audible in the stillness. "What the hell was that? What did we just release?" Jenna stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached for the faint glow of the sphere, now pulsing ominously in the center of the room. Its strange light cast eerie shadows on the walls, the energy around it growing stronger with each passing second. "I don't know, but it's clear we've made a mistake," Liam said, his eyes scanning the dark room. His tone was grim, his usual confidence now replaced with uncertainty. This ship was never just abandoned. It was sealed for a reason. Max grabbed his flashlight, shining it around the room, looking for an exit. The door behind them was sealed tight, but the hum of the ship's power systems flickered to life again, adding to the growing sense of dread. Every instinct in Max screamed to run, to leave this place before whatever was happening escalated further. "We need to get out of here," Max urged, his voice rising with panic. Jenna was already at the sphere, inspecting the strange object. "No, wait," she said, her curiosity overtaking her fear. "We need to understand what this is. This might be our chance to figure out what's really going on here." Liam was still watching the door, his hand resting on the sealed hatch, trying to force it open. "We don't have time for this, Jenna. Whatever that thing is, it's not human." "I agree," she replied, not taking her eyes off the sphere. "But if we're going to survive here, we need to know what we're dealing with." Just then, the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't just flicker, they buzzed and crackled, as if the ship itself was struggling to maintain its integrity. The walls trembled, and the strange hum from the sphere intensified, vibrating through the ship like a living entity. It felt like something deep within the ship had come alive, an ancient force, stirring after centuries of dormancy. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook violently. The teens were thrown off balance as the ship rumbled like a storm was passing through it. "What the hell?" Max shouted, his feet slipping across the cold floor. "We've got to get out of here," Liam yelled, scrambling toward the door. But as he reached for the panel, a violent wave of energy shot out from the sphere, knocking him back with a force that sent him crashing into the far wall. "Liam!" Jenna screamed, rushing to his side. He was unconscious, his body limp. Max was already pulling Jenna back. "We don't have time. It's going to get worse." The rumbling intensified, and now the ship itself seemed to be reacting to the sphere. The walls began to shift, the metal groaning as if something beneath the ship's structure were waking up. The very ground outside the ship seemed to tremble in sync with the ship's movements. Jenna's eyes widened as she helped Liam up. "It's not just the ship," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The sand, ... it's shifting. The desert is moving. It's like the entire planet is reacting to what we've done." Max spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. "What does that mean? What's happening?" Jenna didn't have an answer, but they both felt something was waking up. Not just on the ship, but in the very ground beneath them. The sand, once still and desolate, was now alive. It was as if the ship and the entity inside it were connected to something deeper, something buried in the sand long before they ever set foot on this world. Max glanced around the room, his mind racing. "We need to get back to the colony now. We've disturbed something much bigger than we realized." They stumbled toward the door, but before they could reach it, a deafening screech filled the air. The ship's systems blared an alarm, warning them of a breach. The ground beneath them cracked, and the sand outside began to shift wildly. Something massive was rising from the dunes, something ancient and powerful, and it was headed straight for them. "We have to go now," Max shouted, grabbing Jenna and pulling her toward the exit. Liam, still dazed, followed behind them. The door to the ship's exit slammed open with a sudden gust of wind, throwing sand into the ship. They rushed out into the open desert, and for the first time they looked back at the ship not as a refuge, but as a looming menace. The sandstorm had turned into something else, entirely something alive. The sand was no longer just earth. It was a part of something that was awakening. After centuries of slumber, Max looked around, his heart racing. We need to find shelter. The storm is coming, and it's not natural. Jenna's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. We've disturbed something we can't control. The ship was never meant to be found. As they ran, the ground beneath them rumbled again, and the wind howled with increasing intensity. Something was rising, something ancient, and they had just unleashed it. The storm wasn't just sand, it was a force, a guardian of the buried truth, and now it was coming for them. The truth beneath the sand had been waiting, and now it would claim them. Asterisk, the entity awakens, the sandstorm raged around them, and the earth itself trembled beneath their feet. Max, Jenna, and Liam stumbled through the desolate landscape, the wind biting at their skin, as the ship behind them seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The ship, which they had once thought would be their refuge, was now a beacon for something far darker. Whatever had been awakened in that sealed room was not just a relic of the past, it was a living, breathing force, and it was beginning to make its presence felt. Max turned to look back at the ship, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The metal hull of the ship seemed to shimmer, almost as though it was alive, the energy from the sphere inside it radiating outward. The sand around the ship shifted in unnatural patterns, as if something deep beneath the earth was stirring. "Do you see that?" Jenna asked, her voice shaky, pointing toward the ship's dark silhouette in the distance. Max squinted, his eyes narrowing as a strange, almost imperceptible shape rose from the sands around the ship. It was more than anything humanly possible. It didn't move like a natural storm. It had purpose. The sand was shifting and swirling around something, an entity, before they could react. A sharp, otherworldly screech filled the air, sending a shockwave of energy through the ground. It was deafening. It wasn't the wind. It was something. Ancient something not meant for human ears. The ground cracked open as the shape became clearer, rising slowly, pushing its way from beneath the sands. Liam stumbled, falling to his knees, unable to take his eyes off the growing shape. "What? Is that what's coming out of the sand?" Jenna pulled him up, her voice urgent. "We need to move, now." But it was too late. The creature the entity emerged from the sands, towering over them. It wasn't a single being, but rather an amalgamation of shifting forms, half formed in the shape of monstrous, towering shadows. Its body seemed to pulse with the same eerie energy that had filled the ship, radiating a dark aura. The wind and sand surrounded it like a cloud, and its presence seemed to warp the air itself. The entity turned its glowing eyes toward the teens, and for a moment the world went still. Max could feel it inside him, in his mind, probing his thoughts, as if it was studying him, learning everything about him in an instant. "You ... awakened me." The voice filled their heads, a low guttural hum that vibrated in their bones. It was not spoken aloud, but transmitted directly into their consciousness. It wasn't just a voice, it was a command, an overwhelming presence, one that couldn't be ignored. Max stumbled backward, his pulse racing. "What do you want from us? What are you?" The entity's form flickered, shifting, as if it was learning how to speak to them through their minds. "I am the guardian of the ancient power buried beneath this desert. The ship you found is no mere wreck. It is a prison one that has held me for millennia. You were foolish to awaken me, human." The sands around the entity seemed to come alive, swirling with the dark energy it emitted. It wasn't just a being from another time. It was something far older, something that had been waiting for the right moment to rise again. "We didn't mean to," We didn't know. Jenna's voice trembled as she spoke, but the entity's eyes glowed brighter in response. You had no choice. The voice boomed in their minds. The moment your kind touched the ship, you broke the seal. Now, the power I hold will be unleashed. It is too late to turn back. Max's heart raced as the world around him seemed to shift. The ground beneath them was vibrating with energy. The entity's power flowing like a river, surging through the sand, through the air. The storm was no longer just winded, was alive, part of the entity's awakening, spreading its influence over the land. The horizon darkened as if the storm was a living thing, creeping toward them. We can stop you, Max said, trying to steady his voice, his thoughts racing for a way out. We can undo this. We'll find a way to ... The entity's gaze intensified, the pressure in Max's mind unbearable. You cannot stop what is inevitable. This world will be my new home. The power that has been sealed for so long will rise again, and you will become part of it. You will be changed by it. The entity's form began to pulse with a dark energy that made the air thick with dread. It wasn't just a physical entity, it was a manifestation of something far older, far more powerful than they could comprehend. It was a being that existed on a level beyond the human mind, and it was angry. We won't become part of you, Jenna said defiantly, stepping forward. We'll fight. We'll stop you. But the entity merely laughed, a sound like thunder, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. You cannot fight me. You are ants beneath my foot, and now you will help me rise to power again. Suddenly, the sands began to swirl violently around the entity, forming a massive storm that loomed over the teens. The air grew thick with energy, crackling with an unnatural force that made it difficult to breathe. Max, Jenna, and Liam huddled together, their faces pale with fear. They were up against something beyond their understanding, something ancient and powerful. The entity wasn't just a threat to them, it was a threat to everything that had ever lived. And as the storm intensified, the realization hit Max with full force. There was no running from this. The sands weren't just the desert. The sands were a part of the entity, and now it was coming for them. The battle for survival was only beginning. The final stand. The wind howled, carrying with it the harsh, biting sand as it swirled around the teens. Max, Jenna, and Liam could feel the weight of the entity's presence pressing down on them from all sides. The sandstorm had transformed into something far worse at living. Breathing creature, its power tied directly to the entity that loomed. Above them, the ship, their supposed refuge, now felt like a trap, a prison they had unknowingly unlocked. Max gripped his gun tighter, though he knew it was useless against what they were facing. The entity was no longer just an alien presence. It was a force of nature, a power beyond human understanding. The pulse of its energy was suffocating, filling the air with an oppressive force that seemed to tear at their very souls. The sandstorm raged around them, blurring their vision, but through the haze, Max could still make out the silhouette of the entity. Its form was shifting, constantly changing, as if the creature was adjusting to their presence. Its glowing eyes, those red, pulsating lights locked onto them, and a sense of foreboding filled the air. You cannot fight what you do not understand. The entity's voice thundered in their minds, its power overwhelming. I am not just a creature of flesh and bone. I am a part of this world, part of the desert, part of the sand that you stand upon, and now I will reclaim this world as my own. Jenna took a step forward, her hands shaking but her resolve unbroken. "We'll find a way. We won't let you destroy everything we've fought for." Max looked at her, his mind racing. There was no strategy to beat the entity. No amount of firepower or technology could touch something like this. But words stirred something inside him. They had survived so far because they had never given up, because they had chosen to keep fighting. Even when the odds were impossible. "You think you can stand against me?" The entity's voice sent another shockwave through the air. "You are insects, helpless against the forces of this world. I was trapped beneath the sand for millennia, waiting for the moment to rise. And now you will pay the price for your foolishness." Liam, still dazed but determined, whispered, "We need to stop the storm. It's feeding off the sand and the ship. If we can disrupt its power, maybe we can slow it down." Max turned to him, his eyes widening. "You're right, the ship is tied to it. If we can sever the connection, maybe we can break the entity's control." Jenna's voice was urgent. "But how?" "It's not just the ship. It's the entire desert. The sandstorm, the winds, the power. It's all connected to it." They had no time to waste. Max scanned the horizon, trying to figure out their next move. They were surrounded, trapped, with no clear way out. The storm was growing stronger, the very ground beneath them vibrating with the intensity of the entity's power. It was clear now they weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the survival of everything. "We'll have to try something drastic," Max said, determination filling his voice. "We need to get back to the ship. If the entity is tied to the ship's core, that's where we have to." "Strike," Jenna nodded. "It's a long shot, but it's the only chance we have." With the entity's presence closing in on them, the teens began to run toward the ship, their footsteps swallowed by the howling winds. The storm had intensified, turning the desert into a wasteland of swirling sand and blackened sky. It was as if the world itself had been consumed by the entity's power, its malevolent influence spreading like wildfire. As they neared the ship, the energy around them seemed to intensify. The ground trembled, and the ship loomed ahead, its dark silhouette standing against the backdrop of the storm. The entrance they had once used to enter the ship was now blocked by a massive wall of sand, a barrier created by the entity to prevent their escape. "We can't go around it." "We'll have to break through," Max said, his voice barely audible over the roaring winds. With no other choice, they began to dig, using whatever tools they could find. The sand was like a thick, oppressive force, clinging to everything it touched, but they dug deeper, driven by desperation. The storm intensified, and they could feel the entity's power bearing down on them, a weight they couldn't escape. Finally, after what felt like hours, they broke through the sand, crawling into the ship's lower levels once more. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and the flickering lights cast an eerie glow on the walls. "We need to get to the core," Liam said, his voice tight with urgency. "If we can disrupt its connection to the ship's systems, we can stop it." The teens moved quickly, navigating through the corridors. The ship was alive with energy, its walls vibrating with the power of the entity. They reached the control room, where the ship's central core glowed with an unnatural light. "This is it," Max said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We can't waste any more time." They began working to access the core, their hands trembling as they tried to decipher the alien technology. The ship's systems flickered, its power surging, but Max was determined. The storm outside was growing stronger, and they had no time to lose. "Come on," he muttered under his breath as he forced the panel open. The strange symbols on the console shifted, reacting to their presence. For a moment, it seemed like the ship was resisting their attempts, as though it were fighting them. But Max didn't give up. They had no choice but to keep pushing. Then, with a loud hiss, the control panel lit up, and the ship's systems began to shut down. The lights flickered, the hum of the energy systems slowing down, and the storm outside began to subside. The entity's power seemed to waver, but before they could celebrate, the entity's voice rang out once more, low and filled with rage. "You think you can stop me? You are only delaying the inevitable." The teens turned to face the ship's core, realizing that the battle wasn't over yet. The entity wasn't giving up without a fight. It had been trapped for millennia, but it wasn't finished yet, and neither were they. The last hope. The ship groaned under the pressure of the energy surging through its systems. The core had been temporarily shut down, but the power from the entity still pulsed, a dark presence radiating from deep within the ship. The storm outside had lessened, for the moment, but it wasn't over. It was only a temporary reprieve. Max, Jenna, and Liam stood together in the dim glow of the control room, their faces pale, covered in dust, and their hearts still racing. They had barely slowed the storm, and they knew it wouldn't be long before the entity regained control. "We've bought ourselves some time," Max said, his voice strained but determined. "But it won't be enough. We need to stop it once and for all." Liam nodded, his eyes grim. "The entity is still inside the ship. It's in control of everything. We can't just shut it down. We need to find a way to sever its connection to the ship's core." "But how?" Jenna asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The power it's generating, ... We don't even understand it." Max looked at her, his mind racing. The answer wasn't clear, but they had no other options. "We'll figure it out. We can't let it escape. The entity has to be destroyed here." They moved swiftly, knowing they couldn't waste any more time. The ship had once been a symbol of hope, but now it felt like a death trap. The corridors seemed darker, the walls more oppressive. They made their way toward the lower levels of the ship again, where the mysterious sphere had once glowed. Max couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the ship than they had realized. It wasn't just a random wreck, it had a purpose, and that purpose had something to do with the entity that had been trapped inside it for so long. "This ship wasn't abandoned by accident," Max murmured, almost to himself. "It was a prison, and we let it out." Jenna's eyes flashed with realization. "But why? Why was it locked away? Why is it so important?" Liam shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm guessing whatever it is, it's powerful enough to wipe us out." The sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. The ship was eerily quiet now, almost like it was waiting for them to make the next move. As they descended further into the depths of the ship, the temperature dropped. The walls seemed too close in around them, the flickering lights casting long, foreboding shadows. The air was thick with static, and the hum of the ship's systems now felt more like a heartbeat, steady, unyielding, and growing louder. They reached the lower control room, where the core's power systems were located. This was where the entity's control was strongest. It was clear now that the entity had more influence over the ship's systems than they had thought. The systems that Max and Jenna had been trying to shut down were connected directly to the ship's heart, its central core, and the entity was a part of it. "We need to get to the main power console," Max said, his eyes scanning the room. "If we can overload the system, it might force the entity out of the ship." Liam looked at him, skepticism in his eyes. Overload it. You really think that's going to work? Max's face was set with determination. It's the only way. The air in the room began to hum with more intensity. They could feel that the entity was aware of their presence, aware of their attempts to stop it. The ship trembled, as if fighting back against their intrusion. The energy from the core surged violently, the power systems flickering on and off. The temperature continued to drop, and a sudden, shrill noise erupted from the core, followed by a deep, resonating voice. "You cannot escape me," the entity growled, its voice echoing in their minds. "You have awakened something beyond your understanding. The sand will swallow you. The ship will consume you." Max's breath hitched, but he didn't flinch. "We'll see about that," he muttered. They reached the main power console, and Jenna quickly went to work, trying to hack into the system. Her hands flew over the controls, her fingers shaking from the cold and the pressure of the moment. The voice of the entity rumbled in her mind, a deep, ancient presence that sent chills down her spine. "You cannot defeat me, human. The storm is already here. You cannot stop what has been set in motion." Max gritted his teeth, his hands clenched into fists. "We won't give up," he said through gritted teeth. "We're not just going to sit here and let you take everything." The ship's systems hummed louder, as if the entity was pushing back, using the ship to fight them. The ground beneath them seemed to shift, the walls vibrating violently. A sudden burst of energy shot from the core, throwing them to the ground. Max's head slammed against the floor, and the world spun around him. "This is your last chance," the entity's voice boomed in his mind. "Surrender now, or be destroyed." Max shook his head, struggling to get back to his feet. "We don't have any more time. If we don't stop it now, it's over." Jenna had finally gained access to the ship's core systems. She pressed a series of buttons, her hands trembling, and the console beeped in response. The ship began to rumble more violently, the storm outside growing fiercer, as if the very earth was shaking. The power systems started to overload, and the hum in the air grew deafening. Liam grabbed Max's arm, pulling him back as the console sparked and flashed. "It's working," Liam said, eyes wide. "We've done it." But the ship didn't. "Stop shaking." The lights flickered one last time before plunging them into darkness. The last thing Max heard before everything went black was the entity's voice, one final threat, echoing in their minds. "You cannot defeat me, not yet." The consequences, a new beginning, the darkness was suffocating. Max woke first, his head pounding and his body heavy. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light that filtered through the cracks in the ship's walls. The hum of the energy systems had gone quiet, and the vibrations that had once rocked the ship were now gone. The storm outside had faded into an eerie stillness. But something was different. Jenna and Liam were still unconscious, sprawled across the cold, metal floor of the control room. Max scrambled to his feet, his legs shaky as he moved toward them, fear clutching his chest. Had they succeeded? Had they stopped the entity? He shook Jenna gently, and she groaned, slowly opening her eyes. Liam stirred beside her, slowly coming back to consciousness. They exchanged a look, their faces pale, as if they, too, could feel the weight of the silence around them. "What happened?" Jenna asked, her voice hoarse. She sat up, rubbing her head. "Did we stop it?" Max stood up, surveying the control room. The once thrumming power core now sat dormant, its lights dimmed to a mere flicker. The air felt less oppressive, as though the weight of the ship's energy had been lifted. The ship was quiet, unnervingly quiet. "It's over," Max said, his voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "The ship, ... It's not fighting us anymore. The entity, ... It's gone." Liam staggered to his feet, still dazed but beginning to process what Max had said. Gone? But how? We couldn't have just destroyed it. It was ... too powerful. Max looked at the ship's systems, which were now slowly coming back online. The consoles blinked, their faint light casting shadows. Across the room, the storm outside had subsided, leaving behind only a stillness in the desert. There was no sign of the entity's presence, no hum of its energy, no threatening whispers in their minds. "I don't know," Max admitted, "but it's gone. Whatever we did, it worked. The ship, ... It's ours again." But Jenna's eyes were scanning the control panels. "We've stopped it for now, but the ship, ... It's still linked to something. The power, the energy, it's tied to something deeper, something we haven't fully understood. This isn't over yet." Max felt a chill. It was a good point. While they had disrupted the entity's hold on the ship, the secrets beneath the sand and the ship itself were far from revealed. What had they really awoken? The ship was more than just a colony or a vessel. It was a prison, a weapon, a key to something far more dangerous. "But we've bought time," Max said, trying to push the unease down. "We stopped the storm. We stopped it from rising." Liam nodded, "For now. But we need to get out of here, Max. The desert won't stay quiet forever, and the ship still holds mysteries we can't even begin to understand." Max knew he was right. As they examined the ship's systems, they found the dormant spheres, those alien relics that had once glowed with energy. They were scattered throughout the ship, waiting for the right moment to reveal their full power. The entity was gone, but the ship still held the potential for something far more terrifying. Max turned to Jenna. "We need to leave. We've learned what we can. We can't stay here, not knowing what this ship is truly capable of." Jenna hesitated, her fingers brushing over the control panels. "We might never fully understand what it is, but we need to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands. There are still so many secrets buried beneath the sand." "I know," Max said, "but for now, we have to move forward. Whatever this ship was, whatever it contained, it's not our fight anymore." The storm outside had fully dissipated, leaving the desert as still as a graveyard. The ship's lights flickered back to full strength, and Max could feel a sense of resolution settle over him. They had survived barely, but now they needed to rebuild. They needed to find a place for themselves in this strange new world. As they climbed into the ship's outer hatch, the sand beneath their feet felt different. The ship had become their refuge once more, but the question remained: what would they do now? What would humanity do with the power they had discovered? Max looked out at the horizon, the endless stretch of sand, now peaceful, almost serene. But deep down, he knew that peace wouldn't last. The ship had opened a door to a past they weren't ready for. There were forces at play that they didn't fully understand, and the danger wasn't over. The sands held secrets that had been buried for a reason. "Let's go," Max said, as he looked back at the others. "We have a lot of rebuilding to do." As the ship's engines hummed to life, the teens sat together in silence, knowing their journey was far from over. They had faced an ancient power and survived, but the desert still held its secrets. They had won the battle, but the war was only just beginning.